think sometimes it feels like you're in this very deep bubble where you're doing everything and you're so like in the work that you sometimes miss that there are people around that can help and support you. And sometimes I don't know what everybody else is doing. So having a community really, I think, is a excellent way of supporting each other, but also amplifying each other's campaigns.
I often think that people are very stretched and at capacities. There's just not enough people doing this work. So it's of somehow finding a way to like use each other to like lighten the load rather than feeling like it's this extra thing to kind of get together and support each other.
I also think more privileged groups should make that space for like other people to care for each other or to care for like more like grassroots or activist groups.
And there's also a fear of strategic disalignment. I think organisations are sometimes afraid that other approaches will take a slightly different nuance and therefore you don't want to collaborate. And where sometimes there's real strength in that diversity of approach. There's, I think, a real merit in having spaces where people can support each other and share information and share what they're doing.
I think hope is really, really hard, but I also think it's our duty as campaigners to have hope.
You can't afford to like give up, because if we don't change it, if we don't take up the responsibility of driving stuff forward, then no one else will. And it's about saying, I might not see the fruits of our labour in the next 5 months or weeks or years, but I'm doing something. I'm putting a stone or a step in a pathway that other people will tread and will take in further.
The hope that I have is with sort of ordinary people, and I try to maintain like a feeling that human beings are inherently good, which is difficult and challenging sometimes. But I do think that there is going to be change.
All of us see so many different types of campaigner and campaign in what we do, and that's what gives me hope, is in the face of so many challenges, seeing the kind of ordinary hope in individuals and community groups and NGOs and others, and coming together and thinking, yeah, we can do something about that.
I do a lot of work like training young people and like hearing about like things that they're really angry about and they want to fight, and as much as I still have hope, they have all that hope that I had when I was younger, and they like have the fight to go with it. And so I love being around those people.
I do think that there's something about passing the baton on. We just have to always trust that there will always be people who will want to make a stand and will resist. Society is structured in a way, and our world is structured in a way that we don't think about each other. We just think about ourselves. And so campaigners go against that grain and they say, no, what does the collective want? What is good for the collective?
I think there's hope in challenges to some of the more restrictive laws we've seen. And I think there's hope in campaigners understanding that some of the restrictions they're kind of a chilling effect, they're fear-mongering, but actually they're not as bad. There's space to take risks, defend the right to protest. And I think that's what we have to keep doing, is kind of defend that space in society.
The stakes are so much higher for taking direct action, and the consequences are much greater, and absolutely has a chilling effect on people's willingness to sort of take those sorts of risks and be disruptive. And it means that rather than a much wider section of people being able to sort of participate in forms of action that are a bit softer, you tend to get sort of very risky, kind of closed organising actions that are done by very few people, and there's not really much chance of that ever kind of bubbling over into a mass movement because it is so risky.
But I think that's why we need the coalitions, right? What we're doing is trying to create a critical mass of opinion. And that's ultimately what campaigning is. It is really brilliant when we see the law being used to get justice. We need to remind the people in power that we won't give up, that we will use whatever technique, whatever tool we have at our disposal.
We are representing what will be better for a mass of people, and maybe for us it's actually going behind these companies that are in control of algorithms into communities, like, on doorsteps, like with people in person.
Community organising is probably like the most effective thing we can do, but I also think we need to repeat the messages we're saying on the doorstep, like also online, also like on ads, like all these different things, because that's kind of how like good ideas spread, is like repeating stuff that really works. Most effective campaigns have unusual allies because they have a broad spectrum of like, they resonate across a broad group of people, and I think that's one of the criteria really for a lot of effective campaigns.
Yeah, totally. I think sometimes there's a real benefit, and it isn't without risk, but a real benefit in setting aside wider ideology and finding allies who agree on that specific point, because you can push lots of different buttons and use the positions they are in and the power they have, which is often different to the ones that your campaigning group has.
I think there's something about capitalism, patriarchy, neoliberalism that basically is saying, we want you to stay in your lane and just fight for your little cause. Because of the lack of resources, because of the lack of solidarity, and because of the threats of various laws, etc., and funding being pulled, a lot of people feel silenced and helpless, and then they have these kind of essentially spiritual wounds where you're like watching this thing happen, and you're a social justice activist, and like, I can't say anything because if I say, there'll be consequences. But that's precisely when you need to step up and speak. And I think coming together again as a community of campaigners and saying, hang on, how do we do this? What do the children's group have to say? What do animal rights groups? What do anti-armament groups have to say? What about working class people? What do they have to say? What LGBTQ groups have to say? And I think that's something that has been increasingly lacking.
I think all of the best movements from history, in the Black Panther, but also like if you look at the anti-apartheid movement, like it was a broad spectrum of allies, and it has to include the trade union movement. It has to include people affected by the issue. It has to include like maybe environmental campaigners or whatever. I think uniting those groups is really important if we want to kind of like win change.